Hey folks, welcome to Finding Fuscata. I'm Sean. I've had a lot on my mind over the last couple days, particularly the experience that I had with Whitney Riley when I was speaking with her. And if you listen to or watch that episode, you'll know that we did a meditation exercise where she brought me back to my earliest childhood memories and helped me recontextualize that. So that instead of it being a disempowering moment, it became an empowering moment. And if you listen to that episode, you might think that just those particular parts of my set of limiting beliefs were the things that cleared away. But there are many, many other aspects that cleared away. It's interesting how when you recontextualize one memory, if you change the narrative around one story, you start to see how that reverberates out through time and out through the rest of your life. And when I spoke with her, when we finished the meditation, I made a comment about the heroicism of the infant and how we underrate that. And I know that some folks are word nerds, and there's some debate over whether people should use the word heroism or heroicism. I'm choosing heroicism specifically because in my mind, the way that I view those words is that heroism is more like how you would view a hero, but just on a poster. Like if you see a picture of Superman and he's just standing there with his fists on his hips and not really doing anything, but he's just a picture of this hero. Whereas to me, heroicism is the act. It's a further derivative of the word heroics. And heroics are actions. If you do a heroic action, if you are many actions, then those are heroic actions, or they can be called heroics. So to me, heroicism is a series of heroic acts. And if you listen to the episode, the conversation I had with her, when I was just an infant, I had an experience that set up my paradigm. And one of the things that she touched on that we didn't elaborate on very much in the conversation was that I, as an infant, was still very close to source. I had not lived a long time. I hadn't become jaded or lost or waylaid or so wrapped up in my ego that I'd forgotten about it. I was still sort of a new thing in the world. I didn't really understand I still don't understand how the world works, but I understood even less of how the world works. And when you're in those earliest phases of life, you're still just watching the show. And it's easy to make assumptions when you're first watching a show that this is how things are going to be. Like, for example, when I just started watching this show, Andorra, and it's part of the Star Wars universe, and I hated it at first. The first couple episodes were so slow, they made no sense, had no idea what was going on, but I kept hearing people saying that it was fantastic, so I wanted to push through. And by the time I got to episode 5 is when I thought, oh man, this is really good. This is talking about some very deep subjects. But my first impression of the show was that it was very boring. And my point is that when you're a brand new infant and you're still very close to source and you first come here to Earth, then that becomes your first impression of life. And in my case, I'm fortunate or not fortunate, fortunate or unfortunate, that I remember many of my earliest developmental circumstances which helped form my paradigm of life. And I know most people aren't. Most people don't have a childhood memory until they're maybe 3. I know some people who remember nothing before they were 5. And it just depends on how those parts of the brain develop. But what can happen, this is the thing that Whitney pointed out to me, is that when you're that small, you're very, very driven by ego. And not in the sense of ego like a lot of people in the modern world think of it. Like we have to overcome our ego, or we have to kill our ego, or we have to get past our ego. Not in that sense. And in fact, I don't support or endorse or condone or believe in or in any way do I affiliate with the idea that you should overcome or kill or get past your ego. That's a horrible idea. A better way to do it is to understand your ego and then to incorporate your ego and appreciate what your ego is doing. And this is something I've said for years, because your ego is there to keep you alive. That's its job. Particularly when you are an infant and you need your parents, your siblings, your extended family. You need other people to do things for you because you're literally helpless when you're an infant. You can do nothing for yourself. You're completely dependent on other people. And in order to get those other people to come to you and to take care of your needs, whether you're hungry or you're lonely or you're dirty or you're tired or you want a toy or whatever it is, you haven't developed any language. So all you can do is just cry because there's no words there for you to express yourself. And so that ego is there in us through evolutionary processes in order to keep us alive. And the problem comes in, and the reason many people think that we need to push past the ego and get rid of the ego and even kill the ego, heaven forbid, is because they haven't learned like how much of an important thing that is in our lives. And the thing that Whitney pointed out to me, and I learned through that earliest memory, is that the infant portion of you, the part of you that is still down inside, that is still operating solely from a place of ego, has, for all these years, all these years, if you're old enough to be listening to this right now, my guess is that you're at least 14 at the minimum. I can't imagine anybody younger than a 14-year-old, wanting to listen to Sean Helgerson ramble on. But, I don't know who you are or how old you are. But either way, even by the time you're old enough to hear these words and understand them and understand the contexts, you're probably at least a teenager. But more than likely, you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, or maybe even 80s. And you're hearing these concepts perhaps for the first time. And during all of that time, that ego part of you, that part of you that was all ego all the time, made decisions all the way back, maybe even before you can remember, probably before you can remember, made decisions about how to keep you alive. Because in my circumstance, the story was that I had something that one of the adult females in my life, my aunt, said that I shouldn't have, so she took it away from me. And I got angry because the thing that I wanted was taken away. And when I wanted comfort, I was denied it. I couldn't have that comfort in that moment. So that caused me to take that part of me that sought after comfort, that sought out sustenance and comfort and restorative energy from the feminine. And I put up a wall against that, like in that moment. And as I was doing this, is it a regressive meditation? But as I was doing this meditation practice and walking back through that scene with Whitney, that was one of the things that I saw. I could feel myself putting up a barrier against the feminine. And maybe at later times I'll unpack for you like all the different ways that has unfolded in my life. But for now, I'll leave that there. But the way that Whitney changed the narrative around that story was to have me approach my infant self, who still exists in some context within me, within my spirit. And particularly if you look at time as a whole, or if you were able to step outside of our dimension, you can see that, my life kind of worms through this one particular dimension. And in that sense, that beginning part of me, that zygote and that pile of dust that's on somebody's mantle, it all exists now. Simultaneously, they all exist. But when I can go back to that earlier part of me and I see that infant made a decision to save its life because it realized that when it needed comfort and it reached out, that was not a thing that could give it comfort anymore, that it needed a barrier there. It was making that decision strictly from ego. And what's the ego's role? The ego's role is to keep you alive. And so for all that time, I'm 51 now. So for almost 5 decades, this infant Sean, has been sitting in the grass on that spring day, on an Easter Sunday, back in 1973. Being rejected or being turned away in a gentle way. There was no harshness, there was no violence, it wasn't anything like that. But he set that up, but he set that up to save my life. And it's because of that decision that he made, being close to source and having no experience of how the world works and what any of this stuff is. He made that decision to save my life. And for all this time, I've been fighting against that. I've been slamming myself against the wall because I didn't know what that barrier was. I didn't know it was there. It was invisible to me. And if you listen to the conversation I had with Whitney, you'll see I specifically say that there's things that like I could not see. It was like there was a cloak of deception, and if I didn't quite look at it, then I could see it. But when I looked right at it, it was like there was nothing there. There was an emptiness there because my ego had hidden that from me and said, "You can't. This isn't a thing for you. You have to wall that off. Anything that is the sacred feminine, wall it off. That's not there." Maybe you've heard me tell the story of one of my pocket knives, and I was looking in the back of my motorcycle case, the top case of my motorcycle, and it was cluttered in a mess, and I knew that my knife was in there, but when I looked in there, I couldn't see it. And I looked all around the house, and I was starting to get frustrated because I needed that pocket knife, but I knew it was in there, so I just stopped, and I opened the top case, and I stared in there at the clutter. And I just took a couple deep breaths and I just kept staring. And then within maybe 10 seconds, a few seconds, it appeared in front of me. Now, do I think that the knife like magically appeared out of the ether? No, it was there the whole time. The knife was always there. But in the clutter and the chaos and in the confusion of trying to figure out where it was, when I looked in that case, my brain didn't register that it was there. And it wasn't until I slowed down and I took a breath and I pointed my eyes at the place where I knew that it was, that my brain said, oh, okay, I can show that to him now. And it registered. And my brain had to refresh a little bit. And the same thing happens internally with your egoic mind, with the things that your infant ego set up, or your toddler ego set up, or your kindergarten ego set up, where it said, no, this is off limits. No, this isn't a thing for you. No, you can't have that. No, you can't go there. No, you can't be this. Because you were shut down by the world, and by people, and by your parents, and by your siblings, by your cousins, and by the weather, and by animals, and by who knows what. And choose any of an infinite combinations of things. And those decisions were made internally by your ego. And there they remained. There those barriers remained until now. But when you acknowledge something is when you can heal it. When you acknowledge the barrier, you say, oh, there it is. And you stop fighting it. You stop railing against it. You stop trying to tear it down. You stop being violent and raw and trying to fix it. And you stop. And you say, oh, okay. And you go back to that younger version of yourself. And you say, oh man, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for keeping me safe. And like Whitney said in the discussion that we had, it was, thank you for making me safe. Thank you for keeping me safe. Thank you for helping me to survive, because look at the amazing things that I've done. And look what I've done with my life. I've got 5 kids. I had an amazing Air Force career. I'm hosting a podcast. I'm having incredible conversations with amazing people. I am holding people accountable. There's just amazing things that I've done. I've had incredible experiences. And what I'm asking of you now is that you stop and take a minute and think about your infant self. And know that right now, today, it is a memory, and you're accessing something from the past, and whatever it is that you're accessing from the past can hurt you now. And if you're not brave or bold enough to go and, do that on your own, maybe get in touch with Whitney, or get in touch with a therapist, or get in touch with somebody who can help you walk back through that process. There's loads of people out there who can do it. But I highly recommend that. And when you get there, when you see that infant version of yourself, and when you witness the heroicism of that infant who has held these things at bay for so many years, and you thank him or her for all that work, for standing there thankless and in the dark and forgotten and railed against for all those years, and you thank that version of yourself for doing that work, can't even describe how freeing that is. I encourage you to do it. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're being kind to yourself. I hope you're being gentle to yourself. I hope you're being gentle to others. I hope that you are choosing to live in love. I hope that you choose forgiveness over vengeance. And I hope that you know that you are loved and you are worthy. And I will talk to you again soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.